Hi, it's V with Crafting Daily Dose, and today I have an alternative for the January 2022 paper pumpkin called Kisses and Hugs. So this card is decorated on the front, and you might guess from the ribbon that there's something on the inside. So let's open it up. It's a great way to send lots of love to somebody, and I'm excited to show you how to make this card. Here are the pieces for the card. The card base is very vanilla cardstock, and here I'm using the thick version, but if you just have the regular, that's fine too. It is 4 1/4 inches across by 11 inches in height, and it's been scored down the middle at 5 1/2 inches. I'm also using very vanilla cardstock for the mechanism. This time it's just the regular weight of cardstock, and it's a really simple mechanism. It is 8 1/2 inches across by 1 1/2 inches in height, and it's been scored down the middle in both directions. So along here it's been scored at 4 1/4 inches, and in this direction it's been scored at 3/4 of an inch. We're going to make some additional score lines together as well. Now I'm using this for the decorative layer on the front of my card base, and it is 4 inches across by 5 1/4 inches in height. You will probably recognize that as the lining for the envelope, and it would be nice if I were able to cut it in this direction because the envelope of course is in landscape orientation, but I really need my piece to be in portrait orientation. So what I did was I cut it out and I included this section down here as well as part of the flap. Luckily for me, the X's and O's read the same upside down as they do right side up. So if you look very carefully, you can see the little crease here from where the flap goes. Originally, it was like this, cut out from the envelope. I cut it so that the crease for the flap is about 1 inch from the edge. And I'll be using it in this direction, so that crease goes down here. I'm using this card base from the kit, the whole thing. And I'm also using these die cuts. So I've got 2 of the hearts, the arrow, and then this little piece here. I'm using a few of the sequins from the kit, and I've added in 24 inches of gold shimmer ribbon. And I'll be stamping with the gray granite ink color from the kit. We've got everything we need, so let's get started. I'm going to start with the stamping, and when I stamp with clear photopolymer stamps, I usually like to do it either on top of the foam mat from my Stamparatus or else on top of my silicone mat so that there's a little bit of cushion underneath the paper. On the front of my card, I'm going to be overlapping these 2 hearts a little bit, something like this. And so I'm just going to place it like this so that I know where I can stamp. I want to put "Sending You Love" over here on this side of the heart. And then on the second one, I'm going to put "Friend" in the middle of the heart. Now I'm going to stamp the middle section of this row of hearts. This image looks a lot like a postage stamp to me, so I'm going to put it up here, again, just as a guide for placement. And then I'm going to stamp "Love You" all over this heart to make it look like it's written words on a postcard. I'll stamp it straight on, and without re-inking, I'll stamp it again in another spot. We're going to finish preparing our pieces before we assemble. So this is that mechanism piece, and as a reminder, it's 8.5 inches by 1.5 inches, scored down the middle on both sides at 4.25 and at 3/4 of an inch. I've gone ahead and traced out the crease lines here to show you where they intersect. You don't have to do this on your paper because you can probably see where that point is, but it doesn't show up very well on the camera, so I wanted to make sure that you could see it. We're going to create a new set of score lines that basically makes an X shape that goes right through that center point. I'm using a Post-it note as a guide, but you can use any other scrap of paper that is a square or a rectangle. You just want to make sure that the corners there are even. And I'm going to fold it diagonally, just like this, so that my edges line up. And this gives me a 45-degree angle. This is going to act as my guide so that I can create that same angle with my score lines. So let's do this one first. I'm going to line up the bottom edges here, and I'm going to make sure that this slant goes through my center piece. So it's going to look like this, and I'll use that as a guide to be able to line that up against the track on my trimmer. I'll put this down. And then I'm using the lighter blade, which is for scoring, and I'll go ahead and score it in. So here's what that looks like. Now I'm going to place it the other way. I'm going to line up the bottom edge again. And I'll make the slant go in the opposite direction. This is my new guide, and I'll place it under my trimmer, making sure everything is still lined up. Okay, now my piece is ready to go. Once you've created those creases, then you're ready to fold this piece. The long horizontal score line is going to be folded like a mountain fold, like this. And then the two diagonal score lines are going to be valley folds. We do not need to fold the vertical score line. That was a reference point so that we can figure out the center point, but we don't actually have to fold it. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pinch up the two arms here, and because I've already started to train my folds, you can see that as I pinch these up, they want to kind of collapse together and come together. So let me show that to you again. I'm just pinching these up, and as I do that, the center part wants to collapse in. If yours isn't doing that, you can kind of help it along by guiding it with your hands. And you can also make sure that you've reinforced those folds well. But it should come together like this. I'll go ahead and reinforce everything again. And I'll give you a closer look. So you've got these two arms here and then a triangular piece. It's going to get installed into our card like this. And this is going to be our pop-up mechanism. Before we put it into the card, we are going to decrease some of the bulk at this point because you've got a lot of layers coming together there. I'm just going to take my snips and make a small cut. So I'm barely taking anything off here. That's what it looks like. When I open it up, it just creates a little square hole right there. It doesn't seem like much, but because it decreases the bulk, this is going to help you get into the crease of the card better, and it's going to open up more fully than if you skip that step. We've got one more piece to prepare. Here are the hearts that were originally one of the card bases for the kit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to score right down the middle of each one of these hearts. So I'm going to put this point and this point along the center of my track. Make sure that you're using the scoring blade and not the cutting blade. And I'll repeat that for the other two. On the hearts, all of these are going to be valley folds. So you're going to fold them in like this. And then the spaces in between them are going to be mountain folds. So you've basically created a little accordion pattern. Okay, let's assemble this card. I'm going to start by placing the ribbon about an inch from the bottom edge on the back of the card, and I'll do this with tear and tape. If you've already been subscribing to Paper Pumpkin, you might have some tear and tape left from a few months ago. Otherwise, you can use Stampin' Seal, but I would put it onto the ribbon rather than onto the card because you don't want stray adhesive. Or short of that, you can also use the glue dots. Now for me, I'll use the tear and tape and I'll use the grid paper to measure out 1 inch. So each of these is 1/4 of an inch, so I want 4 of those blocks. Here's my length of ribbon. I have folded it in half, and so that tells me where the halfway point is. And I'll put the halfway point of the ribbon, I'll eyeball that to be about the halfway point of the card. I want that nice and secure. Now I'll flip this over, just kind of leave this dangling for right now, and then I'm going to put that mechanism into the card. So we're going to take the mechanism and put it right into the crease about halfway. I'll go ahead and put some glue on one side. I want to make sure that my glue is all the way to the edges, and I'm just using this little scrap of cardstock to smooth it out. And once the glue has set up, I'll just test to make sure that it opens and that nothing is stuck that shouldn't be. Once I'm happy with that, I can go ahead and put some glue on this top triangle up here. Again, making sure that I'm getting to the edges, and then I'll smooth it out. always test and retest. So we open it up and the arms do pop out. Perfect. I'm going to turn the card this way now because I think it's easier to work with like that at this point. Okay, now we're ready to add those accordion hearts to the card. And to do that, we're going to start by putting just a little bit of glue on this left edge of the top arm. So make sure you've got everything oriented correctly. Here's the back of the card, and you can tell that it's the back because the ribbon is already attached to it. And here's the top arm. We're only going to put a little bit of glue here. Now, usually I tell you to get glue all the way to the edges, but here I'm just going to put a thin line of glue, just enough to hold things in place. And then I can add more glue later on once I know that the placement is right. So I'm just putting a line of glue here and only about a ½ inch or so. So here's my row of hearts all folded up like an accordion, and I'm going to go ahead and glue this in now. I've got the straight edge towards the left, and I'm going to start to kind of close my card in, but I don't want to close this flap onto the glue. I just want to see where these two arms are going to rest. Now, I'm placing my heart underneath the bottom arm and on top of that top arm. So under the bottom, on top of the top. And I'm going to place it in such a way that it's going to fit completely inside my card. So I want to make sure that this bottom edge isn't poking out and the top edge isn't poking out and the side edge isn't poking out. And you can see that I'm having to make some adjustments here. That's why I don't want too much glue to begin with, because then if I wiggle things or adjust things around, then glue is going to end up where I don't want it to be. Make sure that you give that glue a chance to really set up. I'm just going to jiggle it a little bit to make sure that nothing's moving. Once it's secure, you can go ahead and open up the card to test it. Don't worry that this flops over because right now it's not really connected to anything. We're mainly checking to make sure that the arm and the hearts don't stick to this card base, which they didn't, so that's good. I'm going to go ahead and collapse everything back. So this is what we have. Now I'm going to put some glue on the underside of this arm. So I'm holding this down, and again, I'm just going to put a little line of glue here, just enough to hold things in place. Now press that down. I'll give you a peek so you can see what I'm doing. Let that set up. Now, some people might find it easier to attach the heart to the arms before they put the arms into the card, and that's certainly an option. I'm doing it in this order because I want to maximize how much room my hearts have to really be able to spread out. And because placement is not always perfect, I didn't want to risk the edges of the heart showing beyond the edges of the card. Okay, I think everything is set up now, so we can test it and see. That looks good, and it opens pretty wide. Now that the positioning is good, let's go ahead and reinforce with more glue. So I'm going to show you that right now this arm is only partially attached to the heart. So I'm going to take that scrap of cardstock that I've been using, and I'll squeeze out some glue onto that. And then this is going to be like my applicator. Just going to tuck it in here and add a little bit more. This lower edge looks fine. I'll check the other side. So this edge is fine. This part needs a little bit more glue. Now I'll take this piece, add some glue to that. And put on my little postage stamp. I'll fold the card closed, and you might have to guide it gently the first few times until those folds are really trained. Now I'll put on this panel. Remember, I want the crease at the bottom. It's a pretty subtle crease, but the ribbon is going to go ahead and hide it. I'm going to tie the ribbon closed so that my card is flat and it's easier for me to finish assembling the rest of the pieces. For pop-up cards, I like to do the front last and make sure first that everything works on the inside before I use up those pieces to decorate the front. You can trim the ribbon if you'd like, but be careful not to make it too short because then it will be harder to retie. There's our finished card. I love all the shine and iridescence, and then when you open it, there's even more fun on the inside. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed this dose of creativity. If you get a chance to try out the projects, I would love to see it. You can find a link to my Facebook group in the description box below, as well as a subscription link to Paper Pumpkin if you're interested and don't yet have a demonstrator. I hope to see you again the next time, and until then, have a great day.